Hey there, friends. This week, the attorneys for Brian Malinowski, that's the airport director in Little Rock, Arkansas, who was gunned down by the ATF at 6:01 a.m. in the dark. I'm going to continue my further coverage of this because the attorney and even Dettelbach were speaking to Congress this week. His attorney was able to speak yesterday, and today I have a couple of clips of Dettelbach ducking and dodging the fact that they murdered this man and did not have to. Couple of key points. I'm going to show you some videos that were collected not just from the hearing, but from other security camera footage that we have not seen yet. So this is pretty interesting and eye-opening for me. But I want to say this. The new developments that are very, let's just say, troubling to me, that further show how this was carried out, this botched raid, or maybe this raid went off perfectly according to the ATF. Maybe they intended for this man to be shot in the forehead. But they killed the power to his home. I assume the Ring camera doorbell that we saw was one of the battery powered, or I think they even have solar powered ones. So I assume that's what it was, because they did in fact kill the power to the man's home. In fact, I'm going to show you a video here in a second where Dettelbach would not confirm that power was killed, which means yes, power was killed, right? Another fact, a week prior, 7 days prior to them shooting Malinowski in the forehead, they gathered at a vacant park, or I should say a vacant parking lot, an early hours parking lot, looked like a Walmart or something like that, the 10 cars that were going to go kill Malinowski. They gathered, and then they realized he wasn't home. I don't know what tipped them off, but they realized as they were going to kill him that he wasn't home. Now let's understand, this guy had a search warrant just to search his home, his telephone, his safe, all the items inside his home. He was not on the search warrant. He was not to be arrested. So his person nor he were of any importance to this raid. So why did they need him there? Why was it important that Malinowski was at this location when nothing they were going there for had anything to do with him? I want you to keep that in the back of your mind as you watch some of this testimony and as you think about what took place here, and realize this is a man making $200 and something thousand a year, Malinowski, who was gunned down by the ATF. There's a lot of people in this country who do not make that kind of money, that don't have that kind of influence. Wealthier people in many cases know somebody and they have a little bit of influence. Most of us are not going to have that kind of influence. So I want you to understand where we sit in the pecking order, meaning the chances of this happening to us are far greater than what happened to Malinowski.
What was Brian Malinowski's principal livelihood?
He was the highest paid city employee in the city of Little Rock as the executive director of the Little Rock Airport, and it's a matter of public record. I think he made about $260,000 a year.
So it wasn't selling guns?
No, sir. This was
and the rule at the time, the law at the time says if your principal livelihood is not in selling firearms, you do not need an FFL. Is that accurate?
That's my understanding, to the best you can have.
So what was the crime? What did he do wrong?
You'd have to ask ATF. They decided that maybe had committed a crime, even though.
Now the standard is changed, but the new rule didn't take effect until this past Monday. Is that right?
That's correct.
And even under the new standard, there's a question of whether he was in violation of the law. Is that accurate?
A huge question.
Huge question. But under the old standard, it was pretty simple. Is your principal livelihood selling firearms?
That's correct.
And for Brian Malinowski, it wasn't.
Obviously not.
It wasn't. And yet, at 6:02 on March 19th, 10 cars pull up to his home and to the gentlelady behind you's home, come up to the door in tactical gear and put a tape across the doorbell camera so no one can see what's going to go on.
Correct.
Now that's scary to me. Now, if the guy had done, if he had for sure done something wrong, a crime, okay. But they do that, and then 57 seconds later, gunshots erupt, and Brian Malinowski is no longer with us. A good man, you knew the guy, served your community, highest paid city official in Little Rock. What the heck do you think's going on here?
That's the question on the lips of every person in Arkansas that's contacted me, and that's a large number of people.
And isn't it true that a week before, these same agents were there in the Walmart parking lot close by the Malinowski home, going to go execute the search warrant, and then decided not to because Brian Malinowski wasn't home? Why was it so critical that he'd be home?
I don't know, Mr. Chairman. It was a search warrant. In fact, they could have waited till nobody was home and come in. If they wanted to kick the door down, they could have come at noon and kicked the door down when Mayor and Brian were both gone.
And searched and found whatever they were looking for.
Exactly.
And anything they wanted on Mr. Malinowski, if they wanted his phone or anything, they could have served that warrant. They could have got a warrant for that. I'm sure the judge would have given it to him, and they could have done that at the airport. Correct. At his principal livelihood at the airport, correct?
Correct.
Then to add insult to injury. This is the part that just, I know, infuriates Mr. Hill as your member of Congress. And I would bet any American to add insult to injury, the way they treated his spouse, Mrs. Malinowski, sitting behind you, the way they treated her at a moment that maybe the most high anxiety moment in any individual's life, their spouse has just been shot. That to me is like unbelievable. What she had to go through.
It makes me very angry.
Well, it should. It should make all of us angry. I think it makes a Democrat. There's no explanation for that. That to me, and I keep coming back to, was this done for some kind of intimidation? We've seen this from other agencies, frankly. Intimidation. We had the FBI, Mr. Houck, come in, arrest him in front of his wife and children. Same thing. Pre-dawn raid, 7 kids there, take him away. When his attorney said, we'll be happy to work with you. You'd have been happy to work with these guys if they'd contacted you or any.
Absolutely.
That's the part that gets us. That's the part that gets. What was his principal livelihood? It was not selling firearms. I can't figure out what the crime is. Now, maybe, by the way, any of the guns, any of the firearms that Mr. Malinowski sold as part of his hobby, any of them ever be used? Were any of them were ever used in a crime?
The affidavit alleges that they were found in crimes, but the crimes were 3 traffic stops where there was marijuana and a firearm in the car, so that was a crime. Yeah. And but 2 other ones, but they were never fired in the commission of a crime.
Guns themselves were never used in a crime.
They were never used in the commission of a crime, according to the affidavit.
Yeah. So you asked it in your testimony. You said the right thing. Why? Why did they do it? Why did this happen? So that's what we're going to try to find out. And tomorrow, Mr. Dettelbach will be sitting right where you guys are sitting, and we're going to ask him questions about this. He's probably going to say ongoing investigation, but we're going to push him as hard as we can to try to figure out why they would behave in this way and why they didn't wear body cams. I mean, it's almost like, what are they trying to hide? Cover up the doorbell, no body cams? What are they trying to hide?
Now, some points of clarification that they point out in here that we didn't know before. Apparently, there was no knock. This was conducted as a no-knock raid because Brian and Mare, his wife, which you saw sitting right behind the attorney, poor thing, had a box of tissue next to her. She's sitting here discussing and hearing the intimate details of her husband being gunned down. They were in bed. There was no knock at the door. They hear the door get kicked in at 6:01, 6:02. Malinowski tells his wife to stay behind as he grabs his gun and goes to the door to see who's breaking in his home, because somebody was, in fact, breaking in his home. That's whenever he shot at the foot, hit a guy in the toe, and they shot him in the forehead. Now, it's important that I explain that that guy shot in the toe. Somebody made, I wouldn't say light of it in testimony, and I'll see if I can't find that video and post it maybe on my Twitter account or something later on, so be looking out for that. But somebody made light of that as far as saying it's not like they, it was not equal use of force. You got shot in the toe, he got shot in the forehead. Dettelbach got mad about that, talking about these ATF guys risking their life. Let me make one thing very clear, because I don't want to gloss over this point, and I don't want to miss using this point in this video. The only danger that the ATF agents and any accompanying law enforcement agents faced that day whenever they kicked Malinowski's door in and shot him in the forehead was a result of their own doing. In other words, they initiated the danger. Malinowski was not a threat, hence why they weren't there to apprehend him, search him, or arrest him. He was not a danger in any kind of way to them. Had they knocked, had they announced themselves and not kicked the door in, I think we can all agree that this man would have come to the door, probably a little nervous, and said, "Do you have a warrant?" He would not have come out guns blazing. Nothing in his history shows that he would have come out shooting. You kick the man's door in unannounced at 6 o'clock when it's dark and he's in bed. What are you going to assume? Somebody's robbing your house. And let's face it, he has sold guns to people out there so people know he has guns. He may be thinking some of these guys that know I store guns here are here to knock me out and take my guns. Little did he know it was the ATF who had intentions of doing that. But my point is very clear. Sitting here and acting all high and mighty and noble that the ATF agents are putting their lives on the line, their lives would not have been on the line had they conducted this search warrant the way it should have been. Am I armchair quarterbacking? You damn right I am. Because I know without a doubt that had they conducted this search warrant the way a search warrant for a non-violent person should have been conducted, that Brian Malinowski may have been in a jail cell today, but he would not be in a coffin today. That's very clear. Now I want you to see some more of these videos because this is very eye-opening to me. This next clip is the full clip of these guys gathering at a parking lot to discuss the raid on Malinowski's house. And note the date. This is 7 days prior to the actual raid. So these guys realized through communications, and again, I don't know how they knew this, but somebody alerted them that Malinowski was not home. So they leave. 7 days later, they're back. And now they're planning to go kill Malinowski. I have to wonder, just like some other people are wondering, why was it so important that Malinowski be present during the raid when the raid was not to arrest or search him? Why was it so critical that he's there? They already had the warrant to search everything else they needed to search. They cut the safe open, so they didn't need him there for the combination. So why did he have to be there when they were not searching him or arresting him? Everything they needed was still at this location 7 days prior that they could have gone, and no one's life, including the ATF's agents, no one's life would have been at risk. Brian Malinowski's not home. We can conduct a search warrant. He's in no danger. We're in no danger because there's nobody here to shoot me in the toe. Now this next clip is very eye-opening as well. Again, it exposes us to some new information that we didn't know before. Apparently the ATF uses RF blocking technology to block phone signals. So not only are they cutting power to this man's home, they're blocking his cell phone usage so that he can't call for help or 911. I want you to see this, and I want you to, this will infuriate you. Just a quick warning. I know that I don't like to give the leftist warnings of this may contain some troubling footage, but this is going to piss you off. So warning if you guys have a high blood pressure level or your anxiety levels are peaking out right now, this is going to make it worse.
Director, have you ever been a cop?
Excuse me?
Have you ever been a cop?
I have not been a police officer. I was a prosecutor.
Yeah, so you don't have decades of law enforcement experience, but you said you worked with law enforcement, right? That's fair to say, right?
I was a prosecutor for over 20 years in 5 different offices.
You worked with law enforcement. You weren't law enforcement. So is it common for ATF to turn off the power to a location prior to executing a search warrant?
Is it common for us to do that? Yeah. I do not believe it is a common thing that we do.
You're the director. You either know it is common or you don't know whether it's common.
I thought I answered the question. I'm sorry.
Is it common?
My understanding is it's not common, and I want to be very careful to say I'm not commenting on any case because I'm not sure until the facts come in.
Did I ask you about a specific case, sir? I did not, did I? I asked you about policy. You just said it's not common. Next, does the ATF use RF frequency jamming technology to prevent the internet and cell phones from working?
Sir, I'm sorry.
Does the ATF use RF frequency jamming technology to prevent the internet and cell phones from working during the execution of a search warrant?
Again, I am not going to sit here, and I guess I maybe should have said this before, and comment on the tactics that we use when we go into dangerous places, because it provides a blueprint for criminals to hurt us.
Let's get this straight then. You told us you won't answer anything specifically about a case. Now you're saying you're not going to tell us generically.
Maybe we can contact your staff in private setting and have a conversation instead of broadcasting for all the criminals.
Does the ATF use dynamic entry as their means for entry during the execution of a search warrant? Does the ATF still use dynamic entry as their means for entry during the execution of a search warrant?
Again, I don't think it's appropriate. We can communicate with you on these kinds of training issues. I just don't want to give a public blueprint for people tomorrow and the next day who are going to be facing law enforcement through the door to know how we're coming, what we're doing.
Do you assess pattern of life as a part of risk assessment conducted prior to executing a search warrant? Can you answer that?
I think that's far enough afield that I could say, depending on the case, we can assess pattern of life at times, of course. Depends on the case, right? Some cases it's appropriate, some cases it's not. These are I don't do this, right? The career law enforcement people, as you pointed out, do this with decades of experience. I don't armchair quarterback them either.
But here's the deal. You're the director, and I would expect that you would know what the policy is. And looks to me, you've convinced me that maybe Mr. Nels was right. I'm not sure that I thought he was right. But you didn't want to tell us specifically about the Malinowski case. I got that. I think it's wrong. I think it's a false narrative. But then when I start asking you about policies, generic policies, now all of a sudden you don't want to answer those. So when you coordinate with local law enforcement you do coordinate with local law enforcement prior to the execution of a search warrant?
In most cases, yes. Certainly, most of our cases we're doing shoulder to shoulder with law enforcement.
So these are yes or no questions. Thank you for answering yes. Is it the ATF's practice to instruct law enforcement partners to turn off their body cameras when participating in search warrants with ATF?
ATF's written policies that are in our MOUs is that if a local law enforcement agency has a body-worn camera policy and we're going on one of these short-term operations, they are entitled to follow their own policy if they wish. That is in black and white.
Can you tell us the difference on how the ATF would handle a search warrant on a violent felon versus an individual who allegedly sold a few firearms without a license? Is there a distinction in your mind? Is that in ATF's approach?
In every case, we do risk assessment, and it's dependent upon all the facts and circumstances of any particular matter. So in every case we do it, but you can't boil it down to one or two things. It's a risk assessment that experts who are risking their lives conduct.
How does the ATF balance the need for operational security and the need for the safety to the public?
We have to do, you're asking about balancing, I think you said operational security, and we have to keep the public safe. That's obviously paramount. But police officers are entitled to go home alive at the end of their shift also. And we also have to make sure that we're doing that as well. You have to do both.
So you didn't answer the question. The question presupposed exactly what you just said. We know that you have to balance them. How do you balance them? That's the question. How do you balance them?
The answer is both are paramount, and we have to do both in each operation. But I will tell you this. There's no such thing for a police officer as no risk. They sign up, we sign up, the agents sign up to risk their lives. And they often go into very dangerous situations in order to do that. So there's no way to mitigate all of their risks, sometimes very dangerous risk from any operation.
Now, I know that pissed you guys off. I have to settle down a little bit sometimes too. In fact, some of you have even said in my comment section below, calm down. You know, well, I'm not a health risk, so I can afford to get a little angry sometimes, and I do. It's just a natural thing. I don't medicate myself, so I don't have anything to bring me up or bring me down. So I feel that it's healthy sometimes when I get mad, angry, or whichever, because it gives me a bit of a workout. This is infuriating. This is an agency that is lying right before our eyes. They lie about their gun registry. I want to share some other stuff with you guys that you may not know about, just to further infuriate you and let you understand how your government dollars are being spent to kill you. After Malinowski's death, after he was shot in the forehead by the ATF agents, Malinowski's wife was inches from him. He asked her to stay in the room as he came out to confront who was kicking his door in, the people breaking into his home. She didn't listen to him. She followed him out. She was right at his side, slightly behind him, whenever they shot him in the forehead. She very easily could have been shot as well. Surprisingly, was not shot. This lady just witnessed the execution of her husband, right? Do you know what they did to her? She was in her night clothes, barely dressed. It was 32 degrees outside. They took her outside. She's asking about her husband. She just watched her husband get his head blown off. She's asking about him. They will not let her check on him. They bring her out, sit her into a car, a unit, one of the 10 that had collected 7 days prior and realized they couldn't kill Malinowski that time, so they came back 7 days later, one of those 10 cars. She sat in the back of that unit for 3 or 4 hours. Don't know exactly which. It's either 3 or it's 4. I think it's 4 hours, to be honest with you. Had not used the bathroom yet that morning. Remember, they had been waken up from their sleep by this robbery. I'm sorry, this break-in. So they hadn't even been to the restroom yet that morning. So this lady sits in there for hours. She asked to go to a neighbor's house to use the bathroom. They would not let her. What they did do is eventually, after 4 hours, brought her to a fire department, a fire station. Remember, it's 32 degrees outside. Granted, they probably had the heater on in the vehicle. They brought her to a fire department. They let this lady get out of the vehicle. Remember, her husband just got shot in the forehead. They let her get out of the vehicle to go into the fire department in front of all the firemen, still dressed in her night clothes, to use the bathroom. That's how they treat the widow of somebody they just shot in the forehead. This poor lady has been through so much, and I hope some form of justice is served. Maybe it's rectal cancer for the guy who shot her. I don't expect any legitimate justice, if you know what I'm saying. Maybe it's karma. Maybe it's something really, really, really bad. Something that is just an awful thing that you wouldn't wish on anybody. I'm hoping those people get that. And not just them. Let's remember, guys, we keep talking about the ATF and the DOJ, and even Dettelbach for that matter. Somebody made the decision to do what took place. Somebody decided that Mr. Malinowski was the mark. Somebody decided that. Somebody decided that he had to go. Somebody decided that it was not in handcuffs, it was in a body bag that he needed to go. Because again, 7 days prior, they could have easily done everything they needed to do according to their paperwork, and they chose not to, simply because and only because the person who was not the target wasn't there. Came back 7 days later when they knew he was there. Somebody made that decision. Somebody told them to kill the power. Not a group of people, not a meeting. Somebody is the head guy in charge of this whole investigation and raid and said, this is how we are going to do this. Let's cut the power. Let's jam RF signals and have your tape ready to put over his Ring doorbell. There is a person, or at least one or two, but most likely one, responsible for what took place here. I feel like whenever we call out an entire agency, not that I have any kind of remorse for what these people do. These people are scumbags. But I feel like when you say the ATF did this, that takes the blame away from that one person that likely conducted all of this his way and filters it out and waters it down amongst an entire agency that we already know is corrupt. So there's no new blame to go around because it's the same old thing that we hear and see all the time. So I want a name. I'm at that point where I want a name. I think Dettelbach is a soft, pudgy-handed, you can imagine shaking this man's hand. I made a comment earlier that his hands are probably as soft as my baby's butt the day he was born. There's no way Dettelbach made these decisions. This guy doesn't know what's going on. He probably stamps it, and he's probably told at the 30,000-foot level of what's going on. I doubt they told him, we intend to kill this man. So I don't think it's Dettelbach. Dettelbach is a fall guy at this point, and he's the face of the ATF. He's not making the decisions. There's somebody out there with a name that made the decisions for all of this. And again, I feel like it's an injustice to Malinowski and his wife, the survivor, to say the ATF, because we know nothing will ever come of it. When you throw blame at the entire organization, that gives them the chance to not out that one person. I think that Congress and everyone else involved should be asking for that name. Who made this call? Who made this call to kill this man?
God save the Queen, man.
I'm sorry, I thought this was America. He's so horrible.